Hi, I'm Seán Duggan, and welcome to TheFIX, the podcast about Lightroom, Photoshop, post-processing, and the things we do with our images after the shoot. In this episode, I'm joined by Victoria Bampton, the Lightroom Queen, and we're going to be diving in to take a look at the latest Lightroom update, 2015.2. We're going to take a look at the new features as well as deconstruct some of the tremendous uproar that this Lightroom update has created in the photography community. Stay with us. Well, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate that as always. So my guest this week is Victoria Bampton, also known as the Lightroom Queen. And I should clarify that she's the Lightroom Queen in terms of being queen of knowing lots about it and communicating that effectively and helpfully to people. She's not the queen of deciding what happens with Lightroom, so she's in no way responsible for the debacle that happened this last week. Hey, Victoria, how you doing?
Very good, thank you.
just thought I should throw that disclaimer in there just so
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So before we get into talking about the Lightroom update, I just want to mention that you are very active in several Lightroom user forums. You run the lightroomforums.net, and you're also an administrator on the Lightroom help group on Facebook, as well as being a moderator in some of the Adobe user-to-user groups. So you are you're out there a lot in terms of helping people with their Lightroom questions and such. How did all of that come about? How did you get started with this?
Well, that's a good question. My father's a professional photographer, so I kind of grew up in the business. And when I left school, I was working with him for quite some years. Then I started a raw processing business for other wedding photographers, which is still running today. And then I got involved with Lightroom when it got to its first betas. I bought my first Mac in order to be able to run the first beta versions. And I was helping out on the forums a lot, and people kept saying, you ought to create a book out of all of these questions you keep answering. And so I started writing, and it went from there.
Yeah, that's often how these things start. One step leads to another, which leads to another, and before you know it, you're in a totally different place.
Yeah, I never expected it.
So in your raw processing business for helping out other photographers, you they give you the raw files and you make them look great and then just give them back to them for the more creative edits? Yeah,
that's exactly it. My business partner, Paul, is now running it, and he's doing a fantastic job. And it means that wedding photographers, they've got plenty of other things to do. They don't want to be sat in front of a computer all the time. And you know, in the film days, you used to send your film to the lab and the pictures came back all looking nice, and that was lovely. And this just enables them to do exactly the same thing now.
Great. And then you also run the Lightroom Queen website, where you have a free 70-page ebook on kind of a Lightroom quick start guide that people can download.
I do. I was getting so fed up with people who were trying to dive in but couldn't understand how it was working, and they were getting themselves in a mess. So I wanted to be able to get that information out there so they could get off on the right foot and get started.
No, it's a great resource to have available. And then you also have an additional ebook, which you call the Missing FAQ Manual, and that I assume goes in a lot deeper.
It does. It's about 1 3/4 inches thick these days, and about 600 pages. So Lightroom's become a fairly complicated program these days.
Yeah. So how do you measure an ebook in inches? Is that...
No, it's available as a printed copy on Amazon and that as well.
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah, that's very good. So with your involvement in a lot of the forums and stuff, you are there on the front lines with witnessing the user reaction to the latest version of Lightroom, which was released last week. Just well, I guess when this episode's air, it'll be about a week ago that it was released.
It's been an interesting place over the last week. It's not something I'd like to repeat in a hurry.
And so I was, as I mentioned to you, earlier, I was recording for the past 2 weeks down at lynda.com doing 3 new courses. So I was just so busy with that I kind of missed a lot of this. I was sort of aware of it as it was happening. I did update my MacBook Pro when the update became available, but I was doing Yosemite 10.10.5, so I experienced no problems at all. But I know that a lot of other Mac users, particularly those on El Capitan, experienced some major serious issues. So can you give us a rundown of what happened in terms of why the release caused such an uproar?
Oh, yes. In my opinion, it was released too soon. There was the Adobe MAX conference last Monday, or last week, and they were trying to get the release out at the same time, and there were these bugs found at the last minute, and I don't think they quite understood the scale of the problem, and therefore they went ahead and released it, and everybody downloaded because it's just an update. You expect it to be all good, and you don't expect it to be a downgrade. And the forums were suddenly flooded with people who were having problems. They couldn't even get Lightroom to stay open, let alone actually do any work. And then when they did manage to get it to open, they were confronted by this new import dialog, which had removed a number of features that were fairly crucial to pro workflows. So there's been a complete uproar for the last week.
And so we'll get to the import dialog here shortly, but just in terms of the crashing issues, I went through and I read through a lot of comments on forums, both on Adobe's public Lightroom blog and the Adobe blog, and as well as some of the forums on Facebook and other places. And it seems to me that that Mac users running El Capitan were affected the most. Although
yes.
there were some performance issues for Windows users, I understand. Yeah,
there were some performance issues that affected basically every operating system, which was tied to the new Add Photos screen in the new import dialog. And if you could get it to stay open, you could uncheck the checkbox in Preferences, and it should have been a bit better. But yes, the crashing problems, particularly on El Capitan, were, people couldn't even get it to stay open. So that was a huge problem. This is a Monday morning. Everyone's trying to start work.
Right.
So, yeah, you can understand their anger.
Definitely. And you even posted a blog post where you told people how to devolve back to their previous version of Lightroom CC 2015.1, right?
Yeah. In my initial What's New blog post, for the first time ever, I put a warning saying I don't think you should update yet. But obviously a lot of people didn't see that or saw that too late. So then I put the instructions up on how to roll back to the previous version, because that's not clear. There's nothing on Adobe's website explaining how to do that. Yeah. And people couldn't work. That's important information.
Yeah, that's when you're running a business and you depend on a program all day long, that's downtime, which then becomes, a financial issue for your business.
Yes, it does.
Wow, that's incredible. And then I also saw that there were comments that some images that had been imported with auto tone turned on, that those were showing up as just black.
Yeah. There's a problem with
black previews.
Yeah, there's a problem with auto tone in the current version. The version, even the 6.2.1 or 2015.2.1 update that's out now, if you've got auto tone applied in import, the previews just turn black, and you have to reset them to be able to see the picture, and then you can apply the auto tone properly, and it all works again. So yeah, that's another one they're going to have to try and fix.
And so just to clarify, to put people's mind at ease, the actual photo, the actual file is not affected at all. It's just in the display of the photo.
I haven't heard of any problems with any kind of corruption or anything like that. It is just a visual effect.
Yeah. Boy, I cannot remember ever an update to Lightroom or Photoshop. Obviously the two Adobe programs that I'm, the most familiar with. I cannot remember a time when an update has caused this much hue and cry and anger.
I can't remember in any of the software I've used when an update has caused such a public outcry so quickly. I mean, the post on the feedback site went to the number 2 of all time within a few days.
Wow.
That's incredible. I've never seen anything like it.
Was this the post on the apology, the official apology post?
No, this is on the feature request and bug report site on feedback.photoshop.com.
Right.
We were directing everyone to that location to be able to voice their concerns.
Yeah.
And there were hundreds of replies on that very quickly.
And the sense that I got was that the convergence of the big Adobe MAX conference was probably the reason that the decision was made to ship this release, because they wanted to have it, out and available right when they first mentioned it.
Yeah, I think they'd set the deadline for that date, and by the time they realised that there were going to be these issues, and obviously they didn't realise how big an issue, because you wouldn't choose all of this bad PR.
No.
So it was just that ship had sailed, it was too late, and it was going out, and that was
right.
that.
And my sense of this also, just in the way that I know these things happen, is that even if the Lightroom engineering team was aware that there were issues, and obviously they were getting feedback from people such as yourself and the other beta and alpha testers that, hey, this is not really ready for prime time. But my sense is that, those decisions to release it typically come down from higher up in the food chain.
Yeah, I've worked with these guys for a long time. I'm certain they wouldn't have released it if they had any choice whatsoever.
Yeah. So, oh boy, what a mess.
Yes, that's one way of putting it.
Yes, indeed. But, and again, I haven't, do you know if the problem with the black previews of images that have had auto-tone applied, does that extend also, is that only an El Capitan issue, or is that sort of...
No, I think that's all operating systems. That is just a bug in the auto-tone code, I think.
Well, I never use auto-tone. I'm such a... I don't do kind of high-volume event-style photography where that might be useful to use, so... that's why I've never used it, which is probably why I haven't run into it. But I'm going to try to force that and run into that.
That'll be fun for you.
and so then the other thing, apart from just the stability and the crashing issues, which of course are huge, especially if you're affected by it, the other thing that has kind of received near universal derision from at least from the comments that I've been reading, is the changes to the import dialog.
Yes, it's a shock to the system.
Yeah,
I have to admit, when I first saw the import dialog, I was slightly horrified. It has grown on me. There are a few missing features there, but the actual look of it has grown on me since then.
Yeah.
So if they put those extra features back, I think it could turn out to be a really good thing.
Yeah, and regarding the import dialog, in all the years that I've been doing consulting with clients, I have clients that I see on a regular basis in the greater San Francisco Bay Area, as well as online clients that I work with. One of the major issues that they've had with Lightroom has been the import dialog, and typically importing pictures into the wrong place or ending up with redundant nested folders and all that. So obviously there was a need to simplify the import dialog for those users, because I think that a lot of people sometimes, especially if they're not very familiar with the inner workings of file management and file structures on computers, is that they would put their memory card in and then just hit import because, they wanted to see their pictures and work with them and play with them. But of course, if you don't pay attention to where the pictures are going, then that can cause problems later on with the whole organization or lack thereof of your catalog. So I certainly understand Adobe's desire to try to simplify that process. But on the same token, for professionals who had no problem with the previous import dialog, you're right, it does come as a shock to the system.
And I think that's going to be a really fine line for them to try and walk, is making it simple enough that anyone can at least get their photographs into Lightroom so they can start doing something with them.
Yeah.
Without crippling the workflow of the pros who are also using this tool. And that's a really difficult thing to do. And this is their first attempt.
It's a tough balance, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the new import dialog was, I kind of looked at it, I was like, whoa, what's this? And there's this little gear icon in the upper right, which allows you to see the right-hand panel. And, of course, it's greatly diminished in terms of the options that are available there from what it used to be. But then I couldn't find the left-hand panel at all, and I saw that, in a screen grab on your blog, you showed the left-hand panel being there. And it wasn't until we were talking this morning that you had to show me, well, this is where it is. And I'm looking, I don't see it. And, oh, you mean I click on that folder? Oh, okay.
They've hidden it really well. New users aren't going to stumble across it by accident. But it is a tool for advanced users. And once you know that it's there, that's not going to be a problem.
Well, I mean, I don't know, maybe this doesn't say much about me, or maybe I just haven't had enough coffee this morning, but even advanced users, as an advanced user, I couldn't stumble across it.
No, once you know it's there, you'll be okay.
Yeah, once you know it's there, it's true, as in all things. But, I can see, the new import dialog can definitely be a boon for people who are not professionals, people who are new to Lightroom, and anything that is going to smooth that transition of just getting in and working with a program is going to be advantageous for them. And of course, in terms of the segment of the user base, the professional users is not necessarily a rapidly expanding segment of the market base. Yeah,
I would say since Lightroom 4, the majority of the people I've been talking to are amateur photographers. They're not earning any money from their photography. They're doing it because they enjoy it. Yeah. So that's been a huge shift from the early days when it was almost all professional photographers.
Yeah.
And Adobe are clearly wanting to get into that market, which is a logical thing for them to do.
Certainly, yeah.
That doesn't mean they're going to go all the way down to the selfie crowd and those who are taking photos of their breakfast to put on Twitter. Those aren't the people who would be using Lightroom. But there are a lot of amateur photographers who are getting into photography, enjoy using it for creative purposes, but just don't have the computer experience.
Yeah.
So there is a need for them to be able to use Lightroom, but you don't want to dumb it down at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a really tricky line for them to walk.
So this might be actually a good segue to take a look at that import dialog and take a look at it.
So this is the new Add Photos screen.
And so when you put in a memory card or when you press the import button, this is what the users are going to see first.
Yes. If you just put in a memory card, it actually jumps onto the second screen because it already knows that's where you want to import from. But if you press the import button, this is where it's going to go. So we've got a choice here. We can browse the computer using the operating system. Nice, straightforward dialogue that we're used to. And then these pods try to automatically search your computer to find photographs you might want to import. So obviously that's going to be a real benefit to new photographers who have got photographs scattered all over their computer. So it's...
So how is it determining what to populate into those pods? Is it looking for certain things like in your pictures folder or...
Yeah, it's looking for... let's think. It's looking for cameras. It's looking for mobile devices. It's looking for memory cards. It's looking for pictures folders, videos folders, desktop.
I see.
All Dropbox, iCloud, anything like that where you're likely to have photos.
I see.
And it'll autofill about 20 of these pods. And you can scroll through them and pick which folders you want to import. Down at the bottom here, we've got these beacons. So if there was a camera or mobile phone connected, that would show up there. Then we've got memory cards, hard drives, and import from Photoshop elements.
Right. So like on mine, I got this up on my laptop. It was coming up with Facebook photos, and it saw that because that's a folder that I've created for pictures that I specifically used for like my banner images on my Facebook pages or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So that's all quite straightforward. If you're used to using the operating system, you can also drag and drop photos onto that screen, and that works as well.
Yep.
So there's quite a few ways of getting photos onto here. But it's one of those screens that I think advanced users will probably end up turning off in preferences.
Right, yeah.
Because they just don't need it. But it's a good introduction for newer photographers.
Now, I've seen a lot of feedback on the forums where photographers suggest that at this point there should be a toggle switch or a preference that says, take me to the old import dialog.
Well, yeah, change is hard. Change is hard. And realistically, I'd be amazed if Adobe bring back the old one, but I'd hope that they put the missing features into the new one. That's a good compromise. Yeah,
exactly. Well, or the missing functionality, maybe the ability to interact, not the old one, but the ability to interact with it at the same sort of more advanced professional level as you were able to previously.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So once you've decided where your photographs are going to come from, you just click on the pod, and then you get to the import dialog. And when you do it the first time, all you see is the thumbnails.
Yeah, that's the shock for people who were used to the old one.
It is indeed. But again, it's easy for new photographers.
So what happens if somebody just clicks the import button, which is now up at the top, that blue button up at the top? What happens if they click this now without going in and determining where they go? Where will the photos go?
They default to the pictures folder, which is a fairly logical place to put them.
Right.
They've come up with some fairly decent default settings so that new users can just press the import button and nothing too bad will happen. The concern with that is that they won't then know where their photographs are to be able to back them up.
Mm-hmm.
And a few months down the line, I'm expecting a lot of emails from people saying, I've deleted all my photographs, where are they?
Yeah.
And that's going to be a problem.
And if you had previously been, does it honor like the previous import location you may have been using? Because the way that Lightroom used to work was that when you use the import dialog, it would sort of default back to the last location you'd imported to.
Yeah, it should remember all of your last used settings.
Uh-huh.
So once you've set them the first time, you could quite happily hide it.
Yeah.
But there are a couple of warnings with that. If you put your photographs on an external drive usually, and the external drive is disconnected, then it will default back to the pictures folder again.
Yeah.
So you might find your photographs, ending up in a completely different place.
Right.
So it's worth opening the settings by clicking the little gear icon to just double check the settings before you actually hit the import.
And that is controlling where they're going to?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Destination folder pictures. Yeah. So it's on this one, it's wanting to go into the pictures. And then you can do the same organized by date and the same folder choices, naming schemes for the folders, etc. Yeah.
So one of the things that's missing here is there used to be a nice little hierarchy of the folder structure showing how this nice little date format would actually work in reality. And that's one of the biggest complaints, which I would hope that Adobe will bring back, is just that little preview of where exactly on your hard drives the photos are going to end up and how they're going to be organized.
Yeah, I found that to be, an essential feature, because the other thing that it does is in my mind anyway, is that it encourages users to be familiar with the folder structure of where their image archive is stored on their computer.
Yeah, and since they're responsible for backing those photographs up, that's still important.
Yeah. I mean, I tell people that they should be able to visualize in their mind the folder structure of where their images are kept. It should be that like personal to them that they know, okay, this is where it is. Like you go into your closet, okay, here's my dress shirts, here's my casual, stuff, here's the nice shoes, whatever. You know where they're at.
That would be great, but at least know which room the closet is in. That would be a good start. That'll do. That'll do as a starting point. Just
I know I have a closet somewhere in my house.
Yeah. So there's quite a number of settings there. There are a few bits missing. Move is the other one that's an odd oversight. You can now add photographs at their existing location if they're not on a memory card, or you can copy them to a new location, but you can't move them. And again, that was one that only a small number of users actually used.
Right.
but they're the pro users who actually need it on a more regular basis.
Well, it seems an odd thing to remove, because if it's there and you're not using it, then, theoretically it's not hurting anything. It's just an option there. Maybe they felt that some newer users were just getting confused by that option. Maybe that's what it was.
Well, apparently a Lightroom instructor felt that people were getting confused by it. I've never met anyone confused by the concept of moving anything, but it's possible. It's possible.
Yeah, sure, anything's possible.
So there's quite a good selection of options there. The import presets that used to be down at the bottom of the screen are now in the advanced panel. So they are still there. They can still be used. And there's now the copyright info. Makes it easier for people to add their copyright without having to learn about metadata presets. So that's quite useful. And
you can still add keywords.
Yep. It's a little hard.
Presets.
It's a little hard to see that field on a Mac. That the text in there is disappearing into the background, but that's what it's for. Yeah,
the computer interfaces, software interfaces over the last several years have been sort of slowly transitioning to a very minimalist aesthetic.
Yes, and I quite like the minimalist, but if your eyesight's not so good, it's getting a little bit more difficult, I think.
Yeah. Well, I certainly fall into that category.
So that's the settings.
So that's the settings. Now the hidden panel, which is what I couldn't find, because even when you mouse over that area, there's no tooltip that shows up. That's over on the left-hand side, next to the name of the memory card.
Yeah, and if you click anywhere up in this corner, it'll show up.
Oh, so you don't even have to just sort of click on the folder itself.
There.
Okay, yeah, that's not really clear.
No, it's not.
That gets a C+ on user interface design.
Yeah, I'll put in a bug for that one. But I actually, but I have to say, I like this new source panel better than the old one. Mm-hmm. The fact that it's got your common locations there quite easily. You can still navigate your entire folder structure if you need to. You've got access to everything you had in the old one. Yeah. You can now save favorite folders. You have to do that from the Add Photos screen at the moment, but you can do it. And I'm hoping to add that into the right-click menu at some point. So that'll be quite useful to be able to access folders on a regular basis.
Yeah, everything that I see in there, it looks fine. I could totally live with all that. Except for, of course, the one big thing that's missing that has a lot of people ticked off about, which is that little checkbox that would eject or unmount the memory card from the computer once the import was done.
Yeah, that's a strange oversight, and I would hope that'll be back as soon as possible.
I'm sure it'll come back, because they've gotten so much grief about it, and it seems a pretty simple thing that it's just a convenience that a lot of people have gotten used to.
Yeah, I keep taking the memory card out and forgetting to unmount it first, so I'm getting lots of little angry error messages from the operating system.
Right, the computer shaking its finger at you.
Exactly. So, yeah, the dialogue, I have to admit, when I first saw it, it was shock and horror. But if you turn off the first screen, this one actually is becoming much more usable. And I think the interface has grown on me. But it takes a little bit of time. I think it took about 4 weeks before I really started to like it.
One thing that I find kind of visually disconcerting about this is, in terms of software, there's certain visual clues that we get used to where the software is telling us certain things based on how it's displaying something. And the way it used to be in Lightroom is that if you had a memory card of photos and you'd already imported some of those photos. So let's say you took pictures on Tuesday, you imported them, and then a couple days later you took more pictures, but you never reformatted your memory card. So the Tuesday pictures are still on there. So when you plug the card in, what it would do is there used to be an option that said don't show suspected duplicates, or don't import suspected duplicates. And suspected duplicates, or pictures that Lightroom felt were already in the catalog, were kind of grayed out and dimmed back.
Yes.
And so when I look at these thumbnails now, they're all grayed out and dimmed back, even though they have a check mark on them. So there's this sort of schizophrenic dual message there that doesn't quite jive.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's going to take a little bit getting used to if they don't change it.
Yeah.
I think they've nicked it from iOS because I think iOS Photos app does the same thing.
Well,
so whether they're considering that a standard now, I don't know.
Yeah. But it seems to me that the only reason that they're dimmed back is so that the circle with the check mark shows up better.
Yeah.
You know, and of course, when you mouse over the pictures, they do show up. But I mean, for me, as a user expectations, I know that, you know, whenever you file bug reports, it's always like, well, what was your expectation that should have happened?
Yes.
And then what did happen? You know, based on how I've been trained by Lightroom to look at thumbnails in the import dialog for the last, you know, many years, ever since I've been using it, is that if a thumbnail's grayed out, it means that it's already in the catalog.
Yes.
So for me, that kind of breaks that sort of covenant of the user expectations that you know, Adobe and Lightroom have cultivated over the last whatever since 2007, I think, is when Lightroom came out.
Yes. Yeah, the first official release was then. Yeah, I'm interested to see what they do about that, if anything.
Yeah.
If the photos are already in the catalogue, they come up saying already imported, which is quite useful.
It actually has a little badge on the thumbnail that says already imported?
It does, yeah. It has the text across it that just says already imported, and it doesn't let you check it, which is quite good. It doesn't anymore allow you to import duplicates, which, you know, there are some exceptional workflows that still import duplicates into the catalogue, but on the whole, I think that one's probably a benefit because there were a lot of people who were disconnecting their hard drive, or their hard drive letter had changed, and therefore it couldn't find their photos, so they imported them all over again, and then you got a real mess to try and untangle. And that was affecting a large percentage of users.
Right.
And there are workarounds to be able to get duplicates into your catalogue if you absolutely have to.
Yeah. Well, you know, in seeing all of this laid out and explained by you, I'm a little bit less concerned about the import dialog. I do wish that they would make it a little bit easier to discover for people who are used to the older import dialog.
Yeah, I think that would be. There you are. We're back to normal now. Hello. Yeah, the things to look out for is if you're an existing user already used to using Lightroom, go to Preferences, turn off the Add Photos screen, show the panels down either side, and then you're back to something that looks quite normal. It's not so off-putting at that point.
Yeah.
And just wait and see what they do next, because obviously there has been a lot of feedback. It's going to take them time to be able to take that on board, figure out how they're going to apply that feedback. The reality is they're probably not going to go back to the old dialogue exactly as it was, but I would expect them to put some of the most requested features, if not all of them, back into the new dialogue. But that's going to take time. That's not going to happen overnight. So the number of people who are saying, right, that's it, I'm cancelling my subscription, you know, just hang on for a minute and just see what they do, because everyone makes mistakes. You know, it happens to all of us.
Well, and you know, it's kind of classic human behavior, at least in terms of software updates, is when a new software update comes along and, you know, there's a big change that people don't like. You know, it's not uncommon for people to, you know, get their torches and their pitchforks and go, oh, I'm going to cancel my subscription on you. And that's just kind of, I suppose, normal human kvetching on, you know.
Well, and it's completely understandable if you've had your work disrupted for a week and your life turned upside down. Then that's perfectly understandable. But you can end up shooting yourself in the foot by doing that, can't you?
So do you think, you know, but before we move on to talk about some of the cool new features, you know, instead of just the new features that people are really ticked off about, how, you know, this has been a big disruption into the sort of Lightroom ecosystem, and obviously it's a big pain for Adobe to deal with. Tons of bad PR. A lot of people, you know, making their comments on forums and stuff like that, threatening to cancel their subscription and go check out other options and whatnot. So how far-reaching do you think this is in terms of, like, how far out are the ripples going to spread from this big rock that's been thrown into the pond?
Oh, that's impossible to say, isn't it? And I think that's what Adobe are trying to figure out as well. The reality is, yes, there have been hundreds of people who have been posting on the forums and who are really angry. A lot of them are professional photographers because obviously this is disrupting their work. And those are the advanced users who are most affected by this. So all of the less advanced users who are just getting started with Lightroom or have been using it on and off, they're not worried in the least. I've seen some people, a few, who are happy with it, happy with the changes. And this is what we just don't know at the moment, is how much of an effect this is going to have. And hopefully Adobe will learn from it as well. They can't miss all of this. They have apologized, which is, hard to do. Yeah. They have publicly apologized. Some people aren't taking that on board, which is, again, understandable. But we all make mistakes. And it's going to be a question of now what they do next. That's going to be the important thing.
Well, and the other thing that I would just also toss out there is that, for anybody who is, reading the forum comments and of going to the Adobe blog pages where the apology was posted and where the news about the latest update, the update to fix the update that was posted, those comment threads can be kind of an echo chamber of, anger and vitriol. And people say things on there that are, sometimes well-reasoned complaints about the issues that they have with the software. And other times it's just sort of undistilled rage that people would never be saying if they were having a conversation with somebody in person. So, it's always the negative news that gets posted. And obviously there have been a lot of people who were negatively affected by this and are very unpleased. But as you say, there's a lot of people who like the updates and have not had any problems in terms of how it's impacted their workflow. So you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, they're not going to take the time to go onto the forums because they're perfectly happy with it. So it does give you a distorted view of the situation. Right.
So in terms of the other new features that are in this update, obviously there's a slew of new cameras and lenses that are supported. New lens profiles, I'm sure, have been added. But probably one of the bigger things was the modifications to the dehaze filter.
Yes, it's now available in the local adjustments. So you can brush it on, use the gradients. It's the best use for it. And it's really got hidden in amongst all of this chaos. But it's a fantastic new feature.
And so we'll take a look at that in a second. But then other changes that were there, you said that there were an improved import dialog if you're importing directly from Photoshop Elements.
Yeah, I don't know that the import dialog itself has changed, but the process behind the scenes has been rewritten. It can now update. It can now import from Photoshop Elements 14, and it can now import people tags. And there are a few other changes behind the scenes to make it better.
All right.
So that makes that transfer much easier.
Yeah. So
it's all kind of hidden.
And that's obviously for those people who have been using Photoshop Elements, which included its own photo management module.
Yes,
and
that's it.
Want to be moving over into Lightroom.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so do you have an image to demonstrate the dehaze filter? Because I have some, but mine are actually pretty particular to a certain situation that not everybody can is going to be taking. And I'll show those just so people can see what it does to them. But if you have maybe a more common dehaze example.
Okay, let's have a look at this. Here's a fairly typical situation. You're flying over an island somewhere, taking a photograph out of the window of a plane, and you might want to select dehaze and just paint over some areas just to bring back that extra contrast.
Ah, nice.
It's just a fairly typical situation. I mean, we've all sat there and taken a photograph out of a window of a plane.
Right.
And you don't necessarily want to catch the edge of the window there.
Yeah. Or the part of the motor, the engine there too.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Let's see if we can find. I had another couple here.
So it's good for atmospheric haze, seaside shots.
Yeah.
It's pretty common.
So let's take that one. pretty rubbish photograph, but it kind of shows the atmospheric haze that's fairly typical.
Mm-hmm.
And if you applied it to the entire picture, all of this area in the front would become far too contrasty.
Yeah.
So again, it's another situation where you might want to brush it on, or you might want to use a gradient to just pull down to reduce the haze on that.
Great. And so that works with the adjustment brush, the radial gradient filter, and the linear gradient filter.
It does. You do have to watch out because the dehaze is really good at picking up any dust spots.
Yeah.
So you need to do a little bit of retouching after using something like that.
Yeah, and also just noise if there's, noise in the shot. So what I have found is that it does a bang-up job on Aurora pictures. It just does an amazing job, although you have to be cautious because the it does kind of come with a increase in contrast and saturation, and so you have to be careful because that can cause it to really make it look a little bit too extreme.
Yeah.
So I've got just tons here. Some have been processed, some not. But let me just choose one that has not been processed. That one hasn't been processed. And so for those of you who have not used the dehaze filter before, it is found in the effects panel of the develop module, where it will affect the entire picture, or of course, as Victoria just demonstrated now in Lightroom CC, the latest update, it's available as the in the local adjustments.
Yeah.
And so you can see how that just really amps it up. Now, what's interesting about Auroras is that it sometimes seems to be almost adding color to the sky because it increases that contrast and then also that saturation. But that color was there from the Auroras. So you just have to decide, well, how far do I want to go? It's really tempting with Auroras to kind of go overboard and make the effect a little bit too much, really colorful and super saturated.
Yeah, you can definitely go too far with some of these tools.
Yeah, and so what I sometimes do is, and this would be the same as if let me actually turn that off. We'll double click on the slider to turn it off. I love that little shortcut. If you just increase the contrast in an image, you can sometimes get a similar effect. So you can see that dehaze is doing something similar, but in a much better way.
Yeah, it's very smart calculations behind the scenes.
Yeah, let me just actually go out to another one here because there's another one that was working really well with this.
Those are beautiful shots.
This was an amazing night of auroras. This was in the Iceland Meteorological Office. They have an aurora forecast, and they give you a scale of 0 to 9, which is an indicator of whether you're going to see aurora activity. And this night it was a 9, which was extreme aurora activity.
Beautiful.
So this is, let me just hide the, or make my thumbnail smaller. This is over a frozen glacial lake, and just turning the dehaze up, you can see what it does to it.
Yeah, lovely.
So the green color in auroras is the most common one you see. Purple and red is actually rarer. I had never seen purple and red before this night here.
What an experience.
Yeah, it was great. So this was actually at a winter landscapes workshop that I taught last March, and I'm doing another winter landscapes workshop in Iceland this coming March in 2016.
Wow.
Hoping we get another night like this.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, so anyway, and sometimes what I will do is I'll go back and maybe slightly desaturate some areas if I think that it's just amping the color up too much.
Yeah.
Because the thing with cumulative exposures taken at night, any presence of light builds up cumulatively in the exposure. And so you end up with a photograph where the aurora looks a lot more distinct than what you actually saw with your own eyes.
Yeah. And it can end up looking a little bit OTT, can't it?
OTT, what does that mean?
Over the top.
Oh, over the top, yes, indeed. Yeah, it can, and so it's always a fine line. Although on this night, I must say the auroras were very visible. It's not like the camera was making them look more enhanced. They were pretty enhanced that night.
Yeah, lovely.
And so I'm looking forward to trying this out actually on the local tools because I can definitely see that there are some situations where that would be quite cool.
Well, particularly when you've got something in the foreground where you don't want to have quite the same strength of effect, to be able to adapt that is really useful. Right,
like this, the frozen lake down in the bottom here. Maybe I wouldn't want it to be affected. So yeah, cool.
That's the best new feature in the latest update that got rather buried in amongst all of the chaos.
Yeah, all the hullabaloo. And we should clarify that the dehaze feature is only available in Lightroom CC. It's not available in the standalone Lightroom 6.
Yes. There's been a lot of complaints about that, but that is down to accounting regulations and legalities and stuff like that. That's not just Adobe being nasty to people who aren't on subscription. And it's understandable that people are feeling a bit left out, but that has been the deal right from the start, is the CC version gets extra features that can't be added to the perpetual version.
Right, and that's because the features in the perpetual version are added at the point of a major version upgrade, like from going to Lightroom 7, not in the little dot releases.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's, that's obviously one of the selling points for the whole Creative Cloud, is that you are able to get these incremental updates and new features and not have to wait for a full version released in the normal, whatever it is, 12 to 18 month cycle.
Yeah, previously you wouldn't have had any of these features for another 12 to 18 months.
Right, yeah.
I think it was almost 2 years at one stage. Yeah. So that's a long time to wait not to have these features. So you make your choice, don't you?
Yeah, right. Well, thank you so much for stopping by to discuss all of this with us, Victoria.
It's been a pleasure.
Oh no, it's totally been great, and I also really appreciate you stepping in at the last moment to do this.
Oh, I'm happy to help.
Yeah, I normally, as I was mentioning earlier, normally we record the episodes for TheFIX a week to maybe sometimes 2 weeks in advance, but this time I just felt that I had to address this as fresh as possible, and Victoria was just so wonderful to jump in here at literally the last minute, 2 days before we air to go over this.
Well, let's hope it's calmed things down a little bit and shown some of the good features as well as the bad bits.
Yeah. I'm sure it'll smooth out. It may take a little bit of time though.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
So tell the viewers and the listeners again where they can find you and what resources they can find over on your website.
You can find me at lightroomqueen.com. You'll find on the website there's all of the instructions on how to roll back to the previous version if you need them, but also look out because every time there's a new release, I post all of the notes of what's changed, so you're aware of what you're installing before you install it. But also on there's the free quick start guide for new users, and there is my main FAQ book, which is huge these days and covers just about everything you could possibly ever want to know about Lightroom. And there's a Lightroom mobile book as well.
Great. Yeah, Lightroom mobile. Actually, we didn't even mention that. Lightroom mobile is now free to users on iOS.
Yes.
You don't need to have a Creative Cloud subscription to use it, although you do need to have a Creative Cloud subscription if you want to synchronize your collections back to your main Lightroom catalog. But if you can still use it, you do have to have an ID, I guess, an Adobe ID to use it.
No, that's the bit that's tripping everyone up, is you don't sign in with an Adobe ID. If you do, it sets you up with a trial, which is not what you want. You just have to go through the getting started screen then you can start using it.
So maybe they need to improve that little dynamic there so people don't get confused.
Yes, I think so.
Cool, great. Well, thank you again so much. I will have links to Victoria's website in the show notes. Thanks everybody for joining us. Keep in mind that you can always subscribe to TheFIX on iTunes. as well as here at the website, thisweekinphoto.com/TheFIX. And while you're here, make sure you check out some of the other cool photography-related podcasts. As always, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on The Fix.